Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm probably did that too early, so I'll start it again. Because that's the way this podcast is going to go. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrea, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant, the show where we answer your questions about home theater and all things audio-visual. And this week, we're not only a week late, because we took a week off there for all sorts of various reasons, we also have a special guest. So say hello to Josh Pollard from the Digital Media Zone and the Entertainment 2.0 podcast. Hi, Josh.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
Josh. We're really happy to have you. Josh is I'm now decided that he's a guru and expert in all things Microsoft and computer and HTPC and all that stuff. So Josh's going to answer all your questions about that and some of ours. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and get some contact information out and thank our listeners of the week. Our listeners of the week this week, I guess this last 2 weeks, are is it Kendrick? Is that right? I think that's what I'm saying. Kendrick and Stephen, and Kendrick T and Stephen M. They went to the AV Rant website. That's www.avrant.com. Clicked on the buy us a cup of coffee and left a small or large, I don't really know, a PayPal donation, which you can do if you want to support the podcast. You can do that there, and if you want to get your questions in, because this is the podcast where we answer your AV and home theater questions, if you want to do that, you can email us at rob@avrant.com, tom@avrant.com. Come to the website, which I already mentioned, and comment there. You can leave us questions on facebook.com/avrantpodcast. That's all one word. Twitter is at First Reflect for Rob, and for me it's at avrant_tom. Those are all ways. You can also leave us questions on Google+, where they may or may not ever be noticed, because Google+ is a wasteland. But, Josh, before we get into all the questions, and we have lots of them, I do want to get a little bit of a background on you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the Digital Media Zone and the Entertainment 2.0 podcast.
Sure. Well, actually, Entertainment 2.0 is actually older than the website, the Digital Media Zone. It was started back in, well, I should know this, probably 2008 by my former co-host of the show. His name was Adam Thursby. It started as a podcast just about Windows Media Center. He and I were both huge Windows Media Center guys, loved using it. It's still the only thing that is used for television in my house. And started podcasting way back then, eventually expanded that to a website. He's come and gone. Other co-hosts have come and gone. But the show and the site have lived on. It's expanded to be more than just Media Center, especially as Media Center has gotten less usage, less prominence, and a whole lot less support from Microsoft to expand other Microsoft entertainment technologies and just other industry-related things. We'll talk about TiVo and all of those types of things too. So that's where all of this came from. We've been doing it, like I said, since 2008, 2009. Microsoft has recognized me with an MVP award for Windows Entertainment and Connected Home. It's a mouthful, but it's a nice thing to get. It's all about community support, because that's really what we're all doing this for, right? Is to share all of this passion and knowledge with everybody else who loves all of these things. So my niche is Windows Media Center, Xbox, and home theater PCs. Not so much the AV stuff that you guys know way more than I do about.
Well, that's just fine, because we actually know. Well, I guess Rob knows a little bit more about HTPCs. But I did a couple of reviews of HTPCs back in the day, and mostly I was very good at having them send me something to review and then breaking it and saying this doesn't work right, and they would go, "Oh no, that's not supposed to do that. Send it back." I'm like, okay. So that was my.
Your co-host on Entertainment 2.0, that is Richard Gunther, and he was not able to join us tonight. Richard also has another podcast called Home On that I really enjoy, so would you like to tell us a little bit about that one, just so we can get that info out there for people as well?
Absolutely. That's what I tell him every week, is that's my favorite podcast to listen to. So, it's called Home On, and that's about home automation and home control news So we're going to be covering some of your home automation topics tonight. I'm into home automation too, not quite as much as Richard, so I will admit this now that Richard gave me some notes so that I can better talk about some of these questions tonight.
I'm very glad, because that is an area that I know very little about. It's only what I can glean by reading stuff online, so not exactly any first-hand experience my way. So I'm glad you're here to help us out with all that.
Yeah. So before we talk about all the stuff that you care about, let's talk about what we care about. Do you have a home theater, Josh, and what's in there?
I wouldn't call what I have a home theater for sure. I don't have a dedicated space. It's still just a living room with a TV in there. So my setup, especially to you and your listeners, is going to be laughably embarrassing.
That's
so
okay.
My stuff is a lot of it's really old. A lot of it I've like purchased or received secondhand. I had to go through my home theater tonight down the products because I wasn't even sure what everything was. So
That's all right.
I do have an HD TV at least, but even that's a little bit old at this point. The TV, it's an older Samsung 720p, but it's plasma. So I went for the important thing there. That I got the plasma because I watch hockey, and I'm not dealing with that motion blur. So went with the plasma TV.
Nice.
That was important. I do have a 5.1 setup, but the receiver is super old, although it's amazingly not the oldest thing that I'm going to tell you about in the setup. It's a Pioneer VSX D309. I don't know if that means anything to you guys. I looked up the owner's manual, and the only date that I could find in the owner's manual was 1999.
Okay. So you were definitely prior to any HD audio stuff going on in that.
Oh yeah. No HDMI ports, none of that stuff. So I've got, I didn't check. I have a subwoofer. I should have looked to see what it was. I don't know. I actually don't know. It's back in the corner, so I didn't crawl back there to do that, to find out what that was. The main speakers, the front, left, and right, are Boston Acoustic T830s, which I think are from the 80s. I think. But I'm not entirely sure. I actually had to have those replaced because the paper ripped on them because they're so old. I had to fix those. And then I also have a Boston Acoustics. I think it's called the Center Sat 6 is the center channel speaker. And the quote-unquote rears are just two bookshelf speakers from some old stereo that I had from back when I was in college. I don't even know what those are. So it's not an impressive setup at all.
Well, at least the rears are in the back.
Embarrassing.
They are in the back. But the main speakers sound pretty good, and the sub definitely helps a lot, despite the fact that I don't even know what it is. I wouldn't want to live without a sub, but no. I'm nowhere near the amazing subs that you guys talk about or having multiple subs.
Cool. So yeah, we've had a few news stories that are definitely pertaining to home theater PCs and to home automation, and we didn't really cover them very much on AV Rant at all, and I figured you're just the perfect person to tell us what the heck is going on. So one of the stories that I know you actually covered directly on the Digital Media Zone was ArcSoft and their Total Media Theater software, which is a Blu-ray playback software. It's the one I've been using because it's also the only one I've ever come across that will play HD DVDs, and I still have a bunch of those that I would like to play. So what happened? Because I don't even know what happened.
Well, unfortunately, I don't know that we're ever going to know what actually happened. This came as a surprise to everybody, I think, and it really is everybody. The ArcSoft Total Media Theater it's got to be the #1 software for people who are watching Blu-rays and HD DVDs on a PC. Cyberlink makes Power DVD, but we recently did a post on our website to see what what our authors have in their home theater PCs, and I was the only one in that post who wasn't using ArcSoft. So it is really popular. It's really good software. It's not perfect, but it's good. And one Friday afternoon, it just disappeared from their site. And eventually, in their support forums, they had someone from the company post, the official statement is it's been discontinued for strategic business reasons. So no real reason at all, but it's gone.
Was it free or was it pay?
Oh, it was pay. That software was around $100, and typically for Blu-ray software, it would be good for a couple of years, but then they would change technologies on the Blu-rays and stuff, and these software manufacturers would make you upgrade if you wanted to watch new Blu-ray. You were looking at spending $100-ish every couple of years for this software.
Mm. Yeah, so I mean, this is a question to be coming up a little bit later in regards to some actual listener questions that got sent in, but I mean, we can touch upon it right now. I mean, yes, we still have, for the moment, as far as we know, CyberLink's Power DVD still out there if you want to just be able to put a DVD or a Blu-ray into your optical drive and play it on your home theater PC. But one of the things people have been speculating about online is that, like, there are a lot of quote-unquote free Blu-ray players, but none of them really just allow you to put a disc into a tray and hit play and have it go. It's more like if you're ripping it to an MKV or you're using some other, decryption software in the background, and then it is quote-unquote free to let you play it back. But I mean, for people who actually want to do it legally, are there any other options besides Power DVD at this point?
Off the top of my head, in terms of a full suite of software, I can't think of anything. And unfortunately, I'm concerned that won't be around much longer either. The big theory that's going out there is that this is all related to this Synavia DRM crap that they've been putting on all of these discs, where you put in your movie and you're watching, and then 20 minutes into the movie, the audio just cuts out. And it's because of this Synavia DRM. And they enabled that in a fairly recent version of Total Media Theater. And you have to deal with it. And the theory is that they just got sick of dealing with all of these different DRM policies and technologies. So it's gone. Now, the other common option for people is there's a program called AnyDVD HD, and this will basically, you put the disc in the player, and it essentially tells your computer that it doesn't have any of that DRM, and then those free Blu-ray players will work because they're not encumbered by the DRM, because AnyDVD HD is stripping that out for all intents and purposes. Yeah. That's not free either. That software is about $80 also, and also you only get updates for 2 years at a time. So it's an expensive process if you're trying to watch Blu-ray on a home theater PC.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one of the other stories, I didn't even have time to really put it into the rundown of questions here because it basically happened just yesterday and today, but Plex, which is obviously a really popular program for people who want to be able to, have their media collection on their PC at home and then maybe also access it on mobile devices, or the big news that just came out is now on Xboxes. So I'm almost certain I didn't have a chance to listen to your Entertainment 2.0, that what you recorded earlier tonight, and thanks for joining us after that. You're going to be podcasting a marathon, man. But I'm almost certain you must have talked about that. So is there any chance you could shed a little light on what's happening there over at Plex?
Yeah, like you said, Plex is software that you run as a server on a PC as an aggregator of your entire media library. So movies, music, photos, videos, everything. And then they have client apps for everything. You mentioned Windows, Android, iOS, and this week they announced, or actually launched, an app for the Xbox One. The thing that's unique about that is it's really the first app on the Xbox One to give you access to your own content. Now that's not entirely true because there's a crappy media playback app that uses DLNA and stuff, but it's not good. This is way better, but it does require they have their own Plex Pass premium subscription program that they just changed all the pricing on it. All just went up literally last week, right before this thing launched. So the cheapest you can get in on that is $5 a month, but they have all the way up to a lifetime subscription, which I think is $150, but I'm not entirely sure. But Plex is really nice software. It's an offshoot of the original XBMC, and it gives you a really nice UI. So if you're not super concerned about things like live TV and stuff, which we'll get into some of those things later, it's software worth checking out for sure.
So my one big question I've always had on Plex, because this was supposed to be the year where I was going to get to play around with all kinds of different media center solutions, not just Windows Media Center, but JRiver and Plex and XBMC, or now called Kodi. And I was planning to play around all of this stuff. Magically, I've had zero time to do any of that. So my big question on Plex, because this is, AV Rant, where we care about the really geeky stuff in the home theater side, HD audio, I'm talking Dolby True HD, DTS HD Master Audio, those lovely formats, those always seem to be something of a sticking point with other, playback software that isn't a full Blu-ray player. That seems to be the thing. I mean, it's easy enough to include that audio track if you turn your Blu-ray into an MKV file or something like that, but actually playing it back over any of those clients, I mean, I'm thinking the Xbox, technically, it should be able to at least pass that out of its HDMI port because it has a Blu-ray player and it can send out a True HD or a DTS HD Master Audio bit stream if you're putting a physical optical disc in there. But it always seems like it's a trick getting something like Plex to do it. So do you have any info on that or anything to tell us on that side?
I don't know for sure. Unfortunately, I would guess that it probably doesn't support that, and I think that's primarily due to licensing reasons, because they would have to pay to support those things.
Right. That makes sense. Unfortunately.
Now you've made Rod sad. We'll have to deal with that for the rest of the podcast. Thanks. Thanks,
something
Josh.
that can be my HT audio. Is that really so much to ask?
So let's move on to the Harmony home remotes. I've got the Ultimate, and I've been using that. What's your take on, Harmony is really incorporating a lot of home automation and other aspects into their remote line? Have any thoughts on those?
It's a cool idea. It's something that's been around for a little while. They've had excuse me, they've had a hub for a while now that works with the Ultimates that have controlled some devices. It speaks Wi-Fi, RF, IR, and Bluetooth, and it's a cool setup. You can push. We're used to pushing one button on a remote, and it turns on the TV and the receiver and puts it on the right channel. Well, imagine it now being able to close the blinds and turn your lights down and maybe set the thermostat to what you want. I mean, it's really just the next level of what we're already using. I was going to say Ultimate, but universal remotes to do. And I think that's where we all want to be going. The question is, how well is that all going to work, and how well, how much is it going to support? Used to Harmony supporting basically everything that's in our entertainment center, but this home automation space is so big, and there's so much to control. So they're releasing a new hub, and this one is also going to support all of those old things, including Nest thermostats, Hue lights. It's going to support smart things. But the thing that they're being a little bit cagey about, not giving all of the details, and I've seen this reported, and I think misreported on a lot of sites, is in December they're going to be releasing an add-on for this hub, and when they add that add-on to the device, then it's also going to support more things. Now, they're not being very specific, but what we think they're saying is that with that add-on, you'll also be able to control Z-Wave and Zigbee devices. And that expands it a ton to door locks and lots of lighting things. And I mean, Z-Wave is used in tons of home automation things, and Zigbee to a lesser extent.
Yeah, I've seen the custom install market talking a lot about Z-Wave and how it can be extremely powerful if you know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My big question on these, I mean, they're calling them the Harmony Home remotes, and by and large, they look the same as the Ultimate and the Harmony Smart Remote that we've already seen. The Smart Remote, I think, got 3 extra buttons or something like that, but by and large, they look the same, and the hub still looks the same, but they've added a little bit more functionality, and then they've changed the setup software to include more of these home automation type products. But my question is, they're still talking about, like, for example, the Harmony Ultimate Home Remote, being able to have, 15 or 18 devices, right? So you're still programming in, here's all the various devices that this remote can control, and then you have however many, activities, whatever you want, and those can use any number of those devices. But I'm like, does that actually mean each, say, light switch is a device? Does that mean each shade is a device? Each thermostat is a device? I mean, you could very quickly and easily run out of a, 15 or 18 or whatever the number is, I forget offhand, limit. Do you happen to know anything on that side, or?
I don't know for sure, but I would assume the same is what you're thinking, that it is per device. And when it comes to things like shades and lights, a lot of times those are individual. Now, it depends, especially in the lighting space. The lighting space is crazy right now, and in some cases, maybe 3 bulbs would be one device, and that might help. But it probably isn't as bad as it sounds, because you're probably not looking at using this Harmony Ultimate remote to control every single smart device in your entire house. You're probably just using it for the devices in your home theater.
Yeah, I'm thinking this sounds like a good solution for one room, but not necessarily for an entire house, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, the remote's only $350. Why wouldn't you want to buy one for every single room in your house? Maybe not. But that Harmony Home remote is a lot cheaper. That one's $150. The Ultimate Home is $350, and they both do come with that home hub, and then that hub also supports smartphone apps on iOS and Android, and they probably don't have the same device limits if you're using the apps. Would be my guess, but I don't know that for sure either. The other big question that we don't really know about is, how does it handle scenes, and more specifically scheduling things? The home automation space, a lot of times it's, I want to schedule these blinds to close because I know that it, at 11 o'clock in the morning as the sun rises in the east, that side of my house heats up and I want to close those blinds. And we don't really know anything about how all of that's going to work with these new remotes and the new software.
We are still talking about a hub-based system. So you have this one hub out of which come all the commands to control these devices, versus something like Insteon, which has like a mesh network, so that essentially the network in Insteon gets stronger the more devices you add, whereas when it's a hub-based system, you're like, I wonder if I get up into like 100 or 200 devices all trying to be fed off this thing. It's a little bit like connecting that many things to a single Wi-Fi router. So I'm not sure. Hugest fan of the hub-based design for everything.
Well, and typically with a hub, it's a hub that you only need one hub and it controls everything. But that's really, really not the case here, because if you wanted to control smart things, you need the smart things hub. So if you're going to be controlling Z-Wave things, you're probably going to need a Z-Wave hub. So it's not the one hub to rule them all or anything like that. So.
They should build one hub to rule them all, though. They should definitely do that. That should be the one that costs $700. This is the one, and it controls everything in your house and your neighbor's house, whether they like it or not. So
there are already hubs that cost that much money, and they don't rule them all.
Well, not built by Harmony either. All right, so let me see. What else we got in news? Windows, apparently Microsoft forgot, or maybe 9 is their unlucky number. They're trying to break this whole only odd number Windows are any good thing, and they went straight to 10. So what's up with that? What happened to 9?
Well, there's lots of speculation. There's some funny jokes out there. There's lots of different ideas. I think
like
Josh's
Josh's subtle inference that there are some funny jokes, unlike what you just said, Tom. So go on. Go on with your bad self, Josh.
I'm not even sure that most of them are all that funny, but I really just think the reason is simple. Windows 8 has been a perception nightmare. I've always liked Windows 8. I understand why a lot of people don't, and this next version they needed to get away from that, and for some reason they didn't think 9 was far enough away. I think it's a little ridiculous. I think 9 would have been far enough away from 8, but I think it just comes down to that. It has nothing to do with old code checking for versions of the OS that start with 9 and craziness like that.
I saw that. I was like, maybe there's a slight technical reason, because we did have Windows 95 and we did have Windows 98.
Right.
So there were operating systems that started with a 9, and someone might have programmed it as 9X so that it
And
worked on
there
both
is code out there like that.
Yeah.
But there's no possible way that Microsoft used that to determine what they were going to call this thing.
Nice. Well, we won't dwell on that one too much because it's a little silly, and we have several questions that were sent in just for you guys. So we can start with Cameron. He has a home theater and an HTPC in that home theater, and he would like to control everything in that home theater with one remote control. So he's looking at apps, he's looking at remotes, and he's just wondering, what do we actually all recommend in this situation when an HTPC is a big part of it?
Even if you're using an HTPC, it really still just comes down to the Harmony remotes. There's not really anything else out there that we've seen, and by we I'm really talking about Richard and I, my co-host. There's not really anything else out there that's better than the Harmonies. They might not be perfect, but they're still probably the best thing out there.
Yeah,
so
I know a lot of
look
people
for a Harmony in your budget.
Yeah, a lot of people are looking at what is it, iRule, or what's the other one there? There's another popular app, Roomy, I guess it is.
Oh, right, Roomy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like the Harmony as a solution as well, and now with the Harmony Hub, which is everything you're buying these days, that's their current lineup, and they do have an app. So if your preferred way is to use the smartphone or use a tablet, and that's the interface you want to use, then now Harmony has that, and they have the controls. I mean, you just look up what's the actual thing you look up for, like Media Center Edition remote, right? Is the thing to program it in there as your device.
Right, right.
So, I mean, once you have that in there, to me that does work quite well, and Logitech has that actual full-size keyboard with a trackpad on it too, that can control your PC directly and still work as a remote for all your other devices. So.
So I'm not typing enough in my life. I need to type in my home theater. I've been using the Harmony Ultimate a lot lately. I was all Vicodined up after my knee surgery, and I was like, I'm going to program the remote. And so I got it hooked up into my with my parents' gear, because my parents' gear is all here because Josh is needing to know all this. Anyways, so I have it hooked up with a select number of gear, and I figured out that, like we complained about with Harmony remotes in the past, delays were wrong. Okay, the 650 I had programmed worked just fine. The delays were just fine. When I turned on the receiver, it would delay, and then it hit the right input, and that was not happening with the Ultimate. So I went into the Harmony software and was like, I need to change the delay, and it was like, you are screwed because I'm not going to help you. I'm like, you suck. So just because I like to press buttons, I was screwing around with the remote, and I was like, oh, look, that you can change delays on the remote. And that's how you can change the delays when you have one of those inputs that can't be adjusted. I'm like, okay, I like this remote in a lot of ways. The touch screen, for me, it's a little slow. Like it just takes too long to do stuff. Like you go to swipe it on, and it just like, I'm not sure if I swiped it or not. If you swipe it again, you're like, oh, now I just changed the input. So it's a little too slow at times. And it's got some issues for me, but it's really weird how they place things in odd places. So you're like, oh, I want to fix this thing. Well, you can fix it on the remote sometimes, or you can fix it. You might have to go back to the program and replug it into your computer, or you can do it from the app. So one of the things Harmony kind of keeps in that way. But that being said, I have not run into a problem that I cannot fix yet. And I really thought I had when I ran into that input delay, because the receiver was an older receiver and it was taking 3 or 4 seconds to go from powering on to being ready to accept an input, and I wasn't able to change that with the computer program, which I think is odd. But I was eventually able to come to change it. So I cannot revise against, even though I'm not loving the touchscreen as much as I still think that that's a really good solution. It's certainly a lot easier. It just makes you kind of work for it every once in a while.
So we're all in agreement there. None of us think it's perfect, but it's like, as long as you're a little bit creative and persistent and willing to search through things, it probably is the best way. So there you go, Cameron. You're not going to find a more cohesive answer than that. But Cameron also, on his HTPC, he's using XBMC or Kodi, which I still think is a dumb name. But anyway, that's the thing he's using, and he's liking it. But, of course, there are these other media center solutions that are out there. He's particularly interested in JRiver Media Center, and he's basically wondering, is it worth a try? He's saying, what are the things that he might be able to do in JRiver that he can't really do in XBMC, or vice versa? And then, of course, there's Plex and Windows Media Center and Media Browser and My Movies and all those things to look at, too. So can you help us sort through that a little bit, Josh?
Yeah, so I'm definitely not going to claim to be an expert on most of these other ones. I know a ton about Media Center, and I know enough about some of the others, I hope. So my general feeling on most of these is, if you're already using one and it's doing what you need, then cool. You probably just want to stick with it. But JRiver Media Center is an interesting one for this audience. I don't have any experience actually using it, but when I've talked to people who have, the thing that everyone says about it, the main reason you would want to use it is far more control over the audio and video codecs and all of the processing that's going on with that. Like, if you are an audiophile, and I don't know if you guys hate that word or not, but if that's you, then JRiver is probably going to be worth looking at. Now, that being said, you're also going to have a fair amount of knowledge of dealing with all of those audio codecs and filters and, all of that stuff. If you don't know what WASAPI is, maybe you don't want to mess with JRiver. But, if you are really, really into tweaking all of that stuff, then JRiver is definitely worth checking out. In terms of
free trial for that, so it's not as though you have to pay money up front. It's a 30-day free trial, right? So, and it's the full program. Whenever there's that situation, I'm like, yes, try it out, please, and please come back and tell me, because I haven't had time to look at it myself.
and even if it didn't have the trial, it's not that expensive either. It's $50, which is less. I mean, that's less than those Blu-ray software packages that we were talking about earlier. But it's obviously way more than everything else, because Kodi is free and the Plex server is free. But $50 still isn't bad for that if you're really looking for that kind of control.
So what about Plex? What are some pluses and minuses there as compared to Kodi?
I think for most people, what it really comes down to is, do you like the way it looks, and are there specific add-ons to it that maybe only exist for one of those software packages that you're really interested in? Because they both have tons of third-party plugins that you can get. I shouldn't say both, because JRiver's the same way. So I really think that's what it comes down to. I mean, they're all based off of, if you go back far enough, well, not JRiver, but XBMC/Kodi and Plex they're both from XBMC.
Mhm.
So I think the way that it works, I say the way that it looks, but it's more than just how it looks. It's also how it functions, how you're getting around the libraries and stuff. And that matters. It also might come down to support for other devices. Maybe you're an iOS guy and the Plex app on your iPad is way better than the Kodi app. I don't know if that's true, but that could be reason enough. Another one worth checking out for sure, though, is Media Browser 3. I don't think it's based off of XBMC, but it does all of the same types of things and looks really nice and has apps on practically everything. It's not on the Xbox One, but it's on pretty much everything else. It's even on my beloved Windows devices.
Like Windows Phone you're talking about.
Right, exactly. Windows Phone, Windows 8, but even Plex is...
People still own those? Oh, that's cute. I've decided that XBMC at some point became self-aware and renamed itself Kodi. That's why we're dealing with that nonsense. That is on some level self-aware. So.
I'm not sure I would trust a self-aware program that chose the name Kodi for itself, but
hey, dude, It could be a lot worse.
That's true. But now I'm for Media Browser 3, and Media Browser 3 was a huge update. I mean, it really, really changed things. But you'll have to tell me, does Media Browser 3 now stand by itself on your PC, or does it still integrate with Windows Media Center? Because that was the way Media Browser always used to be. It was Windows Media Center that was actually handling things, and then Media Browser was almost like a skin and an add-on on top of it. But Media Browser 3 seems like it has a lot more capabilities. Is it standalone now?
You're absolutely correct. Media Browser 3 is a completely standalone product now. It still has a Media Center plugin that will work with Media Browser 3, but yeah, Media Browser 3 has its own standalone back-end app that doesn't require Media Center at all.
Well, there we go. So, I mean, yeah, it's awfully hard to say, to someone where we're not them that, oh, yes, you will most definitely like one of these other ones much better than what you're using right now. But hopefully that'll help sort through a little bit of the pluses and minuses. We didn't really actually talk, though, about Windows Media Center itself, because as far as I know, I mean, its big claim to fame is its live television integration, being able to have your cable card, if that's what you have, plug in your cable card and access your cable that way, or use an over-the-air tuner. I mean, are any of these other ones handling that anywhere nearly as well as Windows Media Center still does it?
Some of them are just now starting to support live TV at all. None of them are really anywhere close to where Media Center is in terms of TV, and in some ways, they never will be. Primarily on the cable card side. If you're in the United States and you want to watch cable television through a PC, your only option is to get a cable card tuner from someone like Seaton or Silicon Dust, and to use Windows Media Center, because it requires DRM and all of that stuff needs to be certified, and that certification process is, $25,000 to $75,000, and I don't see an open source software team shelling out that kind of money to support that. So if you're doing cable, your only real option is Media Center. Now, if you're an over-the-air person, these other packages have support for those things now, and it should be noted they are supporting cable card now also. This includes JRiver. I checked on that tonight. Media Browser does, and I'm not sure about Plex, but I think XBMC, in fact, I know XBMC does also. They are supporting cable card, but only if your cable provider isn't copy protecting all of your channels. Because if they are, then they can't decode them. So if you have FiOS, then you're in luck, because they don't copy protect pretty much anything. I think sometimes they copy protect like HBO and Showtime, but pretty much everything else is available. But
Mm.
You know, like for me, my cable provider copy protects all kinds of things, so I'm not going to be switching off a media center anytime soon. That's for sure.
Well, speaking of over the air as opposed to just cable card, this is sort of the Cameron show because he's the one who sent in almost all the questions in regard. He's looking to set up an over-the-air, set up it with it using his home theater PC. He's got a Windows Media Server in a back closet. He has a ZBox Windows PC, which is acting as basically his playback device in his TV. And so he wants to install an over-the-air tuner. He wants to keep that in the back closet along with the server, but then he wants to be able to watch and control everything from the living room PC. So like his big worry is that he doesn't want to have to go back to that back closet in order to set his recordings, access the guide, all that kind of stuff, manage the recordings. He wants to be able to do all that from his television. So he's got a couple questions with that, preamble in mind. First of all, which over-the-air tuner would you recommend? I mean, he's looking at Front Row, he's looking at Hop Hog. Is there something else? Which one is the best choice for an over-the-air tuner?
What I would recommend is the Silicon Dust HD Home Run Prime Dual. It's a dual tuner, and the thing that's interesting about it is that this isn't like a PCI Express card that you're plugging into the computer. It's an external box that attaches to your network. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter where you put it. You could put it in that closet, you could put it with the TV, you could put it wherever your antenna is. Maybe it's in your attic, attached directly to the antenna with a big long Ethernet cable going down to your switch. It doesn't really matter. And they're rock solid. They've been building them forever, and they're really great boxes. And it might solve the specific problem that he's looking for here, because the one thing that Media Center doesn't do well if he's trying to use, I guess he's using XBMC, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, the nice thing there with it being on the network is doesn't matter where your computer is either, or how many of them you have. You could set it accessible from all of them. So nice. I don't know as much about XBMC's recording process, but I think that can be configured to have all of that recording stuff happening on that back end PC, the one that he's got in the closet. Right. While still controlling all of that through XBMC running on the living room PC, because it basically works as like a client-server model.
Right. Well, I was thinking, as long as the server that's in the back closet, as long as where the recordings are being stored is, a shared folder on the network, then any client that's attaching to that in another room, should be able to access that shared folder. And with the tuner being on the network as well, it's basically like, all right, here's my network tuner. Point that to the shared folder on the server in the closet. That's where you're going to store your stuff when you record things, and then that's where I'm going to access things from no matter where I'm playing it back. So, right. I mean, is that the solution? Should that work? Hopefully the answer is yes. I'm not sure. Yeah,
I think so. Now, there's one other situation that I think we should briefly discuss. It's not for Cameron, but I didn't mention this when we talked about, what's the big feature that Media Center has over these. And the other side of this is, and this kind of more importantly goes back to cable card again, but if you've got that cable card set up and you want to watch TV on multiple TVs, then Media Center's got you covered there too, but you don't have to buy PCs for every TV and tuners at every TV, because you can build one nice Media Center PC, stick it in a closet or attach it to a TV, and then stick Media Center extenders at all of the other TVs. And that can be an Xbox 360, and if you're on Windows 8, it has to be an Xbox 360. Or if you're still on Windows 7, you could get a Seat and Echo, is pretty much your only other option. And you can find those on sale all the time for $100. It's a tiny little box, like the size of an Apple TV, and it gives you the same experience that you'd get from Windows Media Center on a PC, but on a secondary TV, including live TV and all of your recorded TV, even if it's copy protected. It's the same experience in both places. You start a show in one room, pause it, pick it up where you left off in the other room, that sort of thing.
The only quibble I've had with the extender model, though, is I think it's fantastic for the television side. It works really, really well for that side of things. I just end up coming back to I still have my Blu-rays and my HD DVDs, and I get no lossless HD audio using the extenders. I'm back to standard Dolby Digital, standard DTS. So, I mean, the thing is, this is the AV Rant crowd that is going to possibly be an important factor. Whereas if you have an actual home theater PC as your playback device in every room, then you can get your lossless audio back. So
right.
There's that one consideration that's kept me from going the extender model.
Right. But again, if you have those copy protection issues, then if you're going to do PCs in every room, then they also have to have tuners available to them. Because if you record The Walking Dead in the living room, you're not going to be able to watch that recording on another PC.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's something I wouldn't have thought about. Let's maybe kind of roll it back a little bit here and talk a little bit more generally about HTPCs. Back when I was reviewing them, I was reviewing pre-built units completely, put together by somebody else. They were very expensive. They were supposed to be fine-tuned so that all these little things were worked out. They usually weren't, but they were supposed to be. At its heart for me in HTPCs, the idea is that you're gonna somehow get all of your content and put it onto a series of drives, or some sort of back it up in some way, and then make it available with a nice clean interface up front. One of these interfaces we've been talking about, Windows Media Center, JRiver, or the Plex, these other ones, and it gives you this sort of experience. Is that kind of your how you would describe an HTPC to somebody who's never really dealt with one before?
Yeah. I think you nailed it. It's about having everything all in one place with the same UI that's hopefully good. In some of the things that you've mentioned, like JRiver, I don't think it's a great UI, but some of these other ones are certainly good. I obviously think Media Centers is fantastic. But yeah, it's about having all of your content in one place in a way that everyone in your household can use it. I built my Media Center so that I didn't have to switch inputs. I can have an ancient receiver because I don't need a zillion HDMI inputs. I have a home theater PC connected to the TV. That's it. I don't have any other HDMI devices connected to that TV.
So the two things I think that really scare people off of HTPCs, from my perspective, are complexity, especially when it comes to having to fix issues as they come up, and cost. They're afraid that all you need is a case in this and a couple other things, and boom, you're there. Next thing they know, it snowballs. It's like a home renovation. As I'm going through that right now with my parents renovating their house and living with me in the process, it has snowballed out of control, and now they won't leave. So, I think there's some sort of fear here about the costs and how that can increase over time. If you were gonna describe or talk about how to set up, what you would bare bones HTPC, what you would get for it, and how much it would cost, and how technical you have to be. Maybe you could just kind of touch on that. We should have done this at the very beginning, but we're doing it now, so maybe I'll cut and paste this to the very beginning. But how would you deal with somebody who's like, I've heard about this HTTP stuff, but it scares me?
If it scares you, then I'm not sure that I would recommend it. But if you're someone who likes tinkering with computers, and you don't have to be able to build your own computer. My co-host Richard, his home theater PC is a Mac Mini. He didn't build that, obviously. He just bought a Mac Mini. And he bought an external, pre-built for the Mac Mini device that has a Blu-ray drive in it and an extra hard drive. And it works really well. It's a little bit of more of an expensive way of doing it, but it works. What I always tell people is, you don't build a home theater PC to save money. It's not going to save you money in the end. You do it because you want the experience. If you're comfortable building a PC, then you're probably at the lower end. You're probably looking at like an Intel i3 processor. I probably wouldn't go Atom at this point, even though Atom has come a long way. Go i3 or i5. It's got great onboard video, so you don't have to worry about buying a discrete graphics card, because I can't keep discrete graphics cards straight. I don't know how anybody does.
I've tried. It's awful.
Right. And the rest of it's pretty basic stuff. You probably want to read reviews on, is this power supply loud? Because if it's in your living room, you're not going to want it to be loud. Same with the processor fan, things like that. But it doesn't require a lot of extra hardware, especially if you're not doing TV and don't need to concern yourself with TV tuners. If you're going over the air, that HD Home Run Dual, I think, is about $80. If you're going cable card, you're looking at $200 to $250, depending on the number of tuners you want. There's options for 3, 4, or 6 tuners, and you can stack them if that's not enough. That's another nice feature. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're really looking at probably, especially if you're throwing TV tuners in there, at least $500 to $700 for the box. And people are like, well, why would I want to spend that much when I'm just giving my cable company $10 a month for my DVR? That's a lot of years of DVR. It's also a lot of years with a miserable DVR that only does TV. Not all of your movies and everything. So if you're comfortable building PCs, or at least customizing PCs a lot, then it's not that hard to get into. But you're right, they're not as reliable or stable as the box that you're getting from your cable company or a TiVo or something like that, because it's a PC, not a finely tuned piece of consumer electronics.
So when a consumer or a listener, maybe one of our listeners, says, "Okay, well, I'm intrigued. I've got $500-700 to blow, and I might want to try to do this." Obviously, your podcast is a good resource. Where would you send them to start doing the research that they would need to get into this, what is almost certainly going to become a hobby?
Well, I think you can basically just go anywhere that's a good resource for building PCs. Tom's Hardware is a site that I go to a lot for reviews and stuff, because you're just building a pretty standard PC, with the exception of a TV tuner, possibly, which so many of these are external now that it doesn't even factor into how you would build the PC itself. So go to those sites to learn. I'm definitely not going to claim to be a guru with all of the latest processors and motherboards and stuff. I go to about what's the right hardware to buy now, especially in terms of budget and performance and noise. Noise is a big one, and noise and heat go together. So if you can buy an AMD processor, and they have really great looking specs, but AMD processors run hot. And hot processors require fans, and more of them, and faster, and that gets loud. And you don't want to deal with that unless you've got it stashed away in a closet somewhere, but you've still got to deal with heat, especially if you've got it stashed in a closet somewhere.
With other gear that doesn't want to be hot either.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I would add to that, specifically on the home theater side, I do have to say, over at AVS Forum, they do have a nice section that's dedicated just to home theater PCs. And, when I was first getting into it, that's where I went, because they had a nice FAQ that talked about some of these different interfaces. They were sort of recommending Media Browser at the time. And again, this was the old version of Media Browser before it was even just a standalone product. But, they also talked talked about my movies. They also talked about XBMC, and I ended up going with like, well, I think I like what Windows Media Center and my movies as a combination offers. But it was nice being able to go through that FAQ and that setup guide that they had over there on the forum, because that was what I decided. Someone else can use the same information and come to a different conclusion. So it is worth checking out there, specifically for the home theater side of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that was my interjection to this whole conversation. Continue on, Rob.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we were gonna hope that Richard might be here, but you are also a home automation, person. You probably would also claim not to call yourself a guru just yet, but you're a guru compared to myself. So we got a question from Aaron T. He wants to know what you'd recommend for a low-cost, all-in-one home automation system, and there are many out there, and not all of them are compatible with one another. So his situation is he's moving into a new house. He wants to start by being able to control some lights and electrical outlets. He wants to do it from his iPhone, and then he also is thinking in the near future, control his garage door and access his security system. He wants to be able to do it all from one iPhone interface, not have to use a separate app for every single thing, every single device. And then in the future, beyond this, he probably wants to expand to things, shades, motion sensors, cameras, water shut-off valves, all these types of things that you can do. So for someone who wants to gradually do this themselves, wants to do so for basically the least amount of money possible and not have to use an individual app for each thing, what do you recommend?
So that gets a little tricky, obviously, because there are so many options there, and he's talking about wanting to do a zillion different things there, which is cool. I mean, that's the end goal of everybody, I think. But the good thing is, as much as it pains me to say, the good thing is that he uses an iPhone, because that means that everybody makes an app for it, so that's good. Unlike Windows Phone, which makes me sad, but
what makes other people sad? Windows Phone. But go on.
Ouch.
Dude, honestly, we have one of our listeners who shows up all the time. He loves his Windows Phone. He loves it. So you are not alone. There's one other person. So there you go.
So what I think this really comes down to for what Aaron is looking for, you've really got two good options right now. And that's going with the Revolve Hub or Staples Connect. The reason I would suggest those is they are on the cheaper side. Staples Connect being cheaper, we'll get into that. But they also have a huge amount of devices that they support. Revolve has the potential to support way more than pretty much anything else out there, because it has 7 radios built into that hub. Mm-hmm. They're not all active yet, but they will be eventually. And they support all of the really big things right now, with the exception of Insteon. But you've got Z-Wave support. It supports the Nest. It supports all of the really, really popular things, Hue lights, all that stuff. And the only real downside to Revolve is that the hub is $300. That makes it way more expensive than any other hub out there. But the potential is there that they feel they can justify that price. And they've already got apps for the iPhone, and they just recently released an app for Android also. So you've got that covered. On the Staples Connect side, the hub itself is cheaper. It's $80. Well, there's about to be a new one that's going to be $80 with a couple more radios in it, and then they're also talking about future expansion onto that to even include Insteon. Mm-hmm. The main thing here is that to cover all of these different types of devices, you're probably going to need something that supports Z-Wave, because Z-Wave is the protocol that seems to be used the most in, well, really things that aren't lighting. I mean, there are Z-Wave light switches and stuff, but they kind of tend to be more expensive, and some of them are kind of ugly. But door locks, all the good door locks are Z-Wave. He mentioned shades. Shades, your best option there is through Lutron. Both of these hubs support that. He mentions cameras. Cameras are supported. I know cameras are supported by Staples Connect. I'm not entirely sure about Revolve, but probably. Garage doors, most of those options are Z-Wave also. The area that I think he's going to have a little bit of trouble is he talks about his security system. Those tend... I don't know that a lot of these DIY hub solutions are going to support your run-of-the-mill pre-wired home security system. So he might just be out of luck on that, unfortunately. But pretty much everything else that he's talking about here, if it isn't already a possibility through Revolve or Staples Connect, it probably will be within the next, I'd say, year. So that's what I would look at for a low-cost option to be able to do all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, one of my concerns, because honestly, for myself, just thinking for myself when I'd like to do this, I've been pretty darn impressed with the Staples Connect rollout. They're supporting a lot of things. They've confirmed that for sure they are working with Insteon, so they will have Insteon support, and Insteon opens up to a whole bunch of devices that you can use from them. So I mean, I've liked that, but one of my big concerns is longevity, because some of these companies are pretty small. They could disappear or get purchased up or swallowed up or shut down by somebody. I mean, that's not an impossible thing. Staples is a pretty big company, but this is a new area for them. It looks as though they're putting a lot of effort behind it, but we don't know for 100% sure. So, I mean, do you have any sort of inkling just on the side of longevity, what is a safe bet that it'll probably still be here 10 years from now?
That's a really great question, and that's tough because this space is in huge. I mean, it's constantly shifting, and while Staples Connect is really cool, there's new news this week. If you listen to the latest episode of Home On, Richard's home automation podcast, Staples Connect it's a Staples product, but they're just putting their name on a product made by a company called the ones that make the Connect software, and they're now getting sued by a company called iControl, who you've probably never heard of, but iControl is the company that does the home automation stuff for all of these cable providers and telcos. You can get home automation stuff from Fios and Comcast and all that stuff, and that's all through iControl. And they're suing Zonoff, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them sue some of these other guys. Now, hopefully, they don't sue them out of oblivion because we happen to really like Staples Connect. And with Revolve, they're a startup. You never really know how well a startup is going to do, and I think the big concern with Revolve is their hub is $300. It's 3 times the price of most of the other hubs out there, and we just keep seeing more hubs come in at even lower prices. So I think they're going to have to do something to remain competitive.
So what about like just Insteon? Like if you just stuck with Insteon as the only one, because I mean their technology seems to be proprietary to them, seems to be well protected. They have the patents. They're the patent holders on their particular way of implementing things. So I mean, one of the things, again, just for my own sort of edification and my own research looking towards the future, I'm like, it might be kind of the safest bet to just go, you know what, I'll just start with Insteon because, hey, if that gets added on to Staples Connect, great. But if Staples Connect isn't around 10 years from now, at least I went with Insteon, and they look pretty secure.
Right.
Thoughts on that side of it?
Well, I'm an Insteon guy, so that tells you what I think about it. I mean, Insteon is really good. It's been around for over 10 years. It's really, really stable and reliable. Their products look really nice. They look like they fit in your house, not Starship Enterprise. They are some of the cheaper devices also, which is really nice. The thing that holds me back from recommending Insteon in this case is because they are just one company, they don't have all of the devices that he's talking about. Insteon doesn't have a good solution for door locks. I'm not sure if they have a water shutoff valve, but they do have cameras. They have great lighting solutions. They've got motion sensors and window sensors and water sensors, and I mean, there's a huge amount of stuff there for sure, but there's a couple of areas that are really popular right now, like door locks, that they don't have. So if having a door lock is really, really, really important, then Insteon isn't the way to go. But if you're looking at these other, more, I view them as the more common areas, lighting, motion sensors in general. Insteon, I think, tends to be the better option for sure. And you really make a great point about longevity. There's one other hub that I want to bring up so that you don't go and buy it. And there's a new one called Wink that I believe you can get at Amazon and Best Buy. And it's only $50 for the hub, and they've been running some specials where like the hub is free if you buy a couple of devices, but the software has not been reliable on the Wink hub. So don't rush out and buy a Wink hub just because it's cheap, because right now it looks like you're getting what you paid for. One other resource other than Home On that I would point you to is Dave Zatz has a blog called Zatz Not Funny. I'll give you a link for this specific article. He just a couple of months ago did a battle of home automation hubs where he compared 3 different hubs, and it's a great article because he's used all of this stuff. So definitely want to check that out. It's the Staples Connect, Smart Things, and Wink. And spoilers, Wink doesn't win.
Surprise, surprise. Well, that brings us to the end of the Digital Media Zone specific questions that we had just for you guys. Now, Josh, I know that you do have a very early morning tomorrow, so you'll probably want to cut out, although you're most welcome to stay if you would like to. But I figure this is a good time. How can people get in touch with you? How can people get in touch with Richard? And let people know where they can find you, because this was very informative for me, if no one else. So I'm really happy that you were able to join us today.
Well, if you want to find our website or the podcast, the website is www.thedigitalmediazone.com. Richard and I are also both pretty active on Twitter. My Twitter handle's simple. It's just at Josh Pollard. Richard's a little bit more creative, but also a little bit more complex, I guess. He's got a couple of accounts that he uses. He's got What Impresses Me and What Annoys Me. So it's always interesting to see which accounts he's tweeting from. But those are probably your best ways of getting a hold of us.
Very cool. So, Tom, any other wrap-up questions there for Josh?
No, actually, the home automation stuff really interests me. I'm going to, at this point, the problem I have is I find that home automation works best for people who aren't at home. And since I'm almost always at home, I don't need motion sensors and cameras to tell me what my kids are doing. I just go, "What the hell are you doing over there?" And then they tell me, and that's the end of that. That's my home automation. And whenever the TV doesn't go on, I go over there and turn it on. So, but it is very interesting to hear that we're getting all these hubs out and the number of radios and stuff. And we've been dealing with this in home theater a little bit too. When we get a new technology that we get really excited about. A while back, there was a company that put out essentially it was a rechargeable battery that you could put into your remote, and then it would it had an RF antenna in it, and it would send out signals from the battery. We saw it, I think it was at CEDIA we saw it, and Clint was just over the moon about it. At the time he was this editor-in-chief of Audioholics, and we just thought it was going to be the best thing ever, and next year it was like, nope, no one's heard of it. It's just completely gone. So getting in on early means, it's just like these Kickstarters. You get in early, you can get something for cheaper, or you can get something that's junk and you have to throw it away in a year. So, like Rob said, Josh, you are welcome to stick around. We are not going to go too much longer. We're going to go through as many of these questions as fast as we can. Because we've got a huge backlog at this point, and it's going to be a mess. So, would you like to stick around for a couple of questions, or do you need to go?
I think I'm probably going to pass and take off, but huge thanks to you guys for having me on tonight. I'll be listening to the rest of the show on the podcast for sure. So thanks to you guys, and I'm sorry to all of the listeners who have been writing in and haven't been getting their questions answered because I took up so much of the show today.
Oh, no, it was our pleasure. Thanks so much
Thank
for being
you
on.
very much.
Thank you.
All right. So that was Josh Pollard. That was a lot of fun, Rob. It's also fun that we were able to do this absolutely live on our YouTube channel and on G+. So if you haven't caught this on G+, you can do that. You go to, I guess it's, what is it now? You just go to Google Plus and it's my name, so plus Tom Andre,
Yep.
whatever. That's the
Works, yeah.
website.
And plus Tom Andre. That will
Yeah. And then from there, you put me in a circle. I hate that. You put me in a circle, and then I go, I have no idea who this person is. They must be a listener, and I put you in a circle, and I send out a message to all the listeners that, hey, we're going to be starting the podcast pretty soon. That's 9 o'clock on Tuesdays, at least except for last Tuesday, which we bailed on. Which for those of you that didn't catch it, you need to be on Facebook and maybe Twitter to figure out what was going on there. So you want to follow us there, and then this is the live recording, which then gets uploaded to YouTube afterwards, and I do a little editing just to put a little, graphic up front there, and a little advertisement about my books because it's my podcast. I can advertise my books if I want to. Anyway, so. So, if you ever want to do that, then afterwards at 11 o'clock on Eastern time, we will have a after party where you can join us up to 10 people total. So me and Rob and 10 others, or 8 others for the math impaired, which apparently is me. We can hang out and just talk about all sorts of stuff. And home automation often comes up, believe it or not. Wrong podcast, but they do. So. Yeah, but we actually have quite a few custom installer guys that come up, and they love Insteon as well. So apparently Josh is right, if anybody was curious. So that's good. Now I can turn the volume back up. I was having a really hard time hearing you, Rob, and if you guys, if you guys on the podcast are having a hard time hearing you, it's not the only one.
That's why we all record locally and put it together after the fact. So sometimes the audio version sounds a lot better than the YouTube version.
That's right. All right. So. First of all, we're going to do a couple of quick comments and updates. Jonathan wanted to tell us that he was never going to take my suggestion anyways and went with Rob for his boom box for his tailgating. He got the G Project Gear, G Boom from G Project Gear. That's a stupid name. I wouldn't have bought that on name alone. But it's $100 and says it works great. And it was just the sort of thing he was looking for. Yay, Jonathan. Jeff wants to let everybody know that we mentioned a while back that if you wanted to have 7.1 analog audio outputs on a Blu-ray player, that we suggested that you look at the Oppo BDP 105. You can still look at that. It does have it. But he wanted to make sure that we did not forget that the BDP 103 has 7.1 analog audio outputs too, and it's a little bit less expensive. Quite a bit. Is that yeah? Not just a little. It's like $500, right?
The BDP
he should know. He
is the one that has all the upgraded analog section parts.
Right.
The upgraded analog outputs if you're really into that. But yeah, the BDP 103 does have 7.1 analog outputs that function just fine. So.
Right. There's nothing wrong with them. Yes, for sure. And that it's quite a bit cheaper. So he uses that. It's a good thing. I think we were suggesting the 105 because the person was really worried about something specific, and that's why we did that. Raul, which I love that name, by the way. Raul sounds like he wrote to us a couple months ago saying that his Pioneer Andrew Jones Generation 1 speakers and Denon AVR 391 were sounding so bad at low volumes that he actually preferred his TV's built-in speakers. He experimented and says that we were correct. Yay! It was a bass problem. He tried turning off his subwoofer while playing some music at low volume, and suddenly everything sounded clear and detailed. However, as soon as he turned the subwoofer back on, everything sounded fine. The low frequencies filled back in, but the horrible, overblown, muddy sound quality was gone. So he doesn't know what was actually wrong, but simply resetting the subwoofer seems to have solved the problem. Gremlins! That's my explanation.
That one, I don't know what was going on. I don't know if it's one of these, amplifiers that automatically detects, 120 volt versus 220 volt or something, or he just had some kind of hum, or I don't know what is going on. That's a new one.
Lens. That's what it was. It was gremlins. There is no other explanation. Makes no sense. All right, into questions.
Yes.
Jerrod wants to know what color he should paint his room and whether he should be able to add more insulation to absorption panels. He's a longtime listener, sent us some very nice compliments. He would like to paint his entire home theater, but he isn't sure which color is best. He's heard black. If you have the option, I suppose. I mean, I have never met anybody who thought painting their walls black was a good idea. But he's also heard neutral gray. But should he really paint his entire room in just one shade of gray? What do we recommend? My home theater is, what the hell color is this? Sort of a brick red. It's the color this room was when I moved into it, and I have no intention of changing it. That being said, in my home theater in Jacksonville, I did paint it a gray, a sort of neutral gray, and I loved it. In fact, the room looks good. It's not a bad room. The walls around it, the other walls in other rooms, and that room was open to other rooms, are white. And I actually painted a wall. Like if you look through the home theater, to the back wall through the home theater is the same gray, but the walls all the rest of the walls and the ceiling and stuff are all white. I'm a fan of the gray. I think black is a little. I mean, I think that's a little much, dude.
Black would work really well on your ceiling, though. So you might consider painting your ceiling black. And having black trim, like instead of normally you have white trim around your doors if you have any window casings or something like that, but if you have, black ceiling, black trim, and then sort of gray walls, that does really look nice. I mean, the reason for going for a neutral gray is if you are a videophile and you're really concerned that the colors you see, because you can calibrate your display, of course, but then it's outputting the correct colors. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to perceive them correctly, because if you have different colored walls and some of the lights hitting that, then it sort of biases your eye color-wise. So yeah, I mean, a neutral gray, that is absolutely the way I would go. There's a thing called Munsell gray, which is like the absolute perfect neutral gray. There is a company, RPG Imaging, something like that. They sell paint. They sell Munsell gray paint. It's kind of expensive, so I actually mentioned this before. This was like a year ago. Over at Home Theater Shack, there was a guy who basically went through and got a bunch of, off-the-shelf gray paints that you can get at a hardware store and found which ones were closest to Munsell gray. So I will link up that. It's nice. You can look through the chart there and hopefully find one that is really a neutral gray. And yeah.
There you go.
Go that way.
Yeah, or you can just do what I do and go, I like that one, and it's going to be good enough. Like you said, unless you're a super videophile, and even then, I doubt it's really making the big difference that everybody else says it is. I am going to say, well, Rob's probably right, that black ceiling and stuff like that, I would highly recommend you not do that, because unless you plan on dying in that house, and probably that room, I would keep my baseboards and moldings or whatever white. I would keep my ceiling white. I know it's not optimal. If you're really that concerned about it, buy some cloth, some black cloth, and tack it up there, because painting that ceiling to sell that house, which you will absolutely have to do, would be a nightmare. Which you won't want to repeat after the nightmare of painting it black to begin with, which just sounds awful.
And matte black at that is all for the real projection, the front projection files, who really want that, and they want to make sure that the only light that hits the screen is the light from the projectors. They don't want any light reflecting off of any walls or ceiling or floor or furniture, or heaven forbid if you wore a white T-shirt into that place, because they would kill you for it if you were visiting.
Yeah.
So that was from black.
That's why you don't sit on those chairs, because you never know what they were wearing, because they didn't want to reflect stuff. Maybe a human, whatever. Jerrod also has some GIC acoustics 242 and 244 absorption panels. 242s are 2 by 4 by 2 inches thick, and the 244s are 2 by 4 by 4 inches thick. They all have about 1.5 inches of airspace behind the insulation, and some of the panels are straddling the corners of his room. Would stuffing more insulation into these airspaces improve the performance of the panels? And if he does add more insulation, what kind of insulation should you use? Second question first. You should use rock wool or the rigid fiberglass, because that's what's in the panels anyways. Anything else, you're wasting your time, as far as I'm concerned. Second, you should not do that. Most of the research I've seen, taking the panel off the wall improves the performance of the panel,
Mm-hmm.
just as if you had added that foam that behind it. So adding it just basically says I've now added it, and I'm still getting basically the same performance. So I don't think that you need to put anything behind. If you've got them an inch and a half off the wall, if you've got them straddling the corners, that's probably just fine. The corner ones, I think you can make the argument that stacking up some more rigid fiberglass back there can make a difference, because especially with the 2x4 foot panel, there is quite a bit of space back there, but it's not going to be this dramatic effect you're going to expect. The putting them in there to begin with was the dramatic effect. Everything else is going to be a fine-tuning thing.
Yeah, I know that Glenn Kuras, who is the GIK Acoustics, he's the GK in GIK Acoustics. He strongly recommends having an air space behind, which is why they build their panels that way. That's why they build the frame, so there is this air gap in behind. So when he has those tri-traps, those are the ones that are triangular and fit right into the corners, there is an airspace built into those. So you do have the option. You could put some additional insulation behind the panels that are straddling the corners. So if it's the 244s that are in the corner and straddling, you could sort of make those into a 6-inch thick panel, and then because they're straddling the corner, there'll be some air gap behind them. So you could do that, but how much benefit you're actually going to see from that, it's not.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty negligible, and you're certainly the ones that are hanging around the wall where you're going to fill up that gap behind. You're really not going to see anything.
No, I wouldn't do that at all.
Yeah.
That might actually worsen things for all we know.
Could very well. Jeff E has an older home that was built in 1938. Oh, crap. This is one of those power conditioning questions.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the wiring has been updated. Some has not. The electrical panel for the house is brand new because their old one actually caught fire. Yes. That's awesome. It was an Onkyo plugged into it. He's got a Panasonic.
He does have a accuracy. That was not.
I just saw it after I said it. Sorry. That's hilarious. He's got... Oh, God. If I had been drinking beer, this would be the end of the podcast right here. He's got a Panasonic Plasma, Oppo Blu-ray player, HTPC Onkyo receiver that has HDMI ports, but none of them accept audio of any kind, which means it's an older one.
Mm-hmm.
And an iTac Wi-Fi IR blaster that controls using the iRoll app from an iPad Mini. Okay. When he turns on the Plasma, all the lights dim.
Yep.
And when he vacuums and turns on the Plasma, a black hole appears in his kitchen. He's also had his HTPC shut down unexpectedly. He thought it was the PC's power supply, but he replaced it with a very high-quality unit, and the random shutdown still happened. So he figures it might be his house's wiring. The budget $250. Should he get a power conditioner? Well, that's to use voltage to prevent the dimming lights and random shutdowns. Should he get a battery backup UPS? What do we recommend? Okay, the voltage regulator, first of all, it will stabilize your voltage, but it doesn't really fight against really quick, really deep power dips or really quick flickering of your lights. Over here in Florida, we get all sorts of lightning strikes all the time. You'll see the weather, and it'll tell you how many they had. And even if there's nothing on the screen, there's no weather anywhere. They'll still say, "Oh, there was 15, 38 or 125 lightning strikes." You're like, "There's not even clouds." Nope, doesn't matter. It's Florida, lightning. Deal with it. So, last night, my lights. There was no rain. There was no wind. It hadn't rained all day. There was no forecast for rain. Last night, my lights flickered. Just no reason for it. I'm connected up to
Jeez. H-type from APC, right?
Yeah, it's an H-type APC. It's not the entry level. It's the one right up from it.
Well, there was an H10 and there was an H15.
H15. So I'm on the H15, which is plenty of power for the stuff that I'm doing. But still, the TV turns off. Everything, the cable box cycles, which means I'm out 20 minutes waiting for that thing to reload all the apps. So you're not going to stop that from happening. Almost certainly the reason that I think that your HTPC is shutting down unexpectedly is because there's these dips. that are going on that your HTPC is more sensitive to than other things. Your voltage regulator is not going to stop that. I don't really think it will. It'll stop, gentle power fluctuations in range. Okay, it's not that quick.
Well, it's a voltage regulator. It's not a current
That's
regulator.
true. That's true.
If you're having a current sag, which is why the lights would dim, not going to help you there. So yeah, I mean, battery backup. Battery backup. I would recommend a battery backup regardless. Even if you have no power problems, I would put a battery backup into my home theater system because, he didn't mention a DVR, did he? But I mean, okay, home
Yeah.
theater. No,
He's got home theater PC though. That's almost certainly got some DVR functionality.
anything with a spinning hard drive, anything with a lamp, anything with
Fan.
a cooling system.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I would always end having a battery backup. There's no reason to not have one. And so he's saying he's got a budget of about $250. APC, that is absolutely the company I always recommend for any
Only one I recommend.
power protection. They have their J-type. Their J-type are their lower cost ones that have battery backup, and they have a great unit called the J25B. It goes for exactly $250, so sorry if you were hoping to spend even less, but it's worth every penny. It's a really good unit. It does not have voltage regulation, but that is not your issue. You need something that will stabilize the current, make sure that if you have a dip, that battery's going to kick on. It's only going to be momentarily, but it'll make sure that the power just continues to flow, and that will help you. You might still get a flicker in your lights. I don't know if you're ever going to solve that entirely, but it will definitely stop your PC from shutting down if that's the problem going on there. In my own system where I have my Kuro still going, every time I turn that on, I have a J15, which is an older and larger unit. You can't even really find it conveniently anymore. But every time I turn on my plasma and my receiver, like within a split second of each other, because I hit my activity on my Harmony remote, it flicks over to the battery just for a second. And yeah, so that's what's going on there. You're sucking a lot of power all at once, turning on that plasma, battery backup all the way.
Yeah, I just don't see that you're going to be able to solve it with it. The power condition doesn't do what you think it does in this case. All right, so Stephen W. also has a power conditioner question because his house was recently fitted with a new smart meter by his electric company. We actually asked Josh about this for the podcast, and he was like, I don't know. Which will tell you exactly where this one's going. After the new meter was installed, Steve's headphone rig began to have problems. His DAC is locking up and displaying a DC offset error message. His AV receivers in a couple other rooms of the house do not seem to be having the same problem, but Steve was tried plugging his headphone equipment into a trip light UPS, which seemed to help, although he isn't 100% certain it is completely fixed. One issue, though, is that the trip light UPS is quite noisy, which defeats the whole purpose of the headphone app to begin with. Have we ever heard of smart meters causing this type of problem? Rob?
Well, here in Canada, Saskatchewan has decided to remove all the smart meters that they installed because they got it from one particular company and theirs caught fire.
Yay!
So, yeah,
The Onkyo?
lawsuits. Nope, it wasn't that. Here in BC, where I am, we went with a different company. We've deployed a large smart meter grid. It seems to be working just fine. My building's outfitted with them. I haven't had any power problems at all. I have no idea if they're tracking how much electricity I use more accurately. My bill hasn't seemed to change. But anyway, yeah, I have heard of the odd thing. Mostly, it's when it wasn't installed correctly. Which is quite common because they go in there and they're supposed to really inspect everything, especially the base, where the wires are coming up out of the ground into the meter. There's very often little cracks and stuff like that that have just happened over time. They're supposed to fix all that stuff. If they don't, you can definitely run into problems. But the fact that nothing is happening in any other room of your house, it's only in this one area and it's only with this one headphone DAC, it kind of makes me wonder if that particular headphone DAC just has a really finicky power supply in it, which would not be unusual for some of the more esoteric gear.
I'll be honest with you, I'm wondering, and we haven't even gotten to the rest of the questions here. I'm wondering if this particular outlet, the wires running to this, is having, there's something in that old electrical box that all the wiring and stuff that's going in there isn't having a problem. He didn't say anything about him switching it to different outlets. I would definitely switch to other outlets and see if that's part of the issue too.
Yeah, I would take it to, you said you've got these other AV receivers in other rooms. They're not having a problem. I would take it to one of those rooms and plug it into that same outlet and see if this still happens. Because having the smart meter installed, that seems to have been the only variable that changed in your house, but it might simply have revealed a problem that was there all along.
That's right.
So yeah, it's hard to blame it entirely just on the smart meter.
So what type of power conditioner or UPS would fix a DC offset error? Well, if the other one did it, then any other UPS would do it. The one that Rob suggested before might be a good solution, but that doesn't have any voltage regulation on that one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is a case that offset error usually does happen when you have a consistent over or under voltage. Because, I mean, what a DC offset error is if you were to look at the waveform of an audio signal, you have your neutral line, and then the signal is going above and below that line. A DC offset error is when that neutral line basically gets moved up or down, because there's a constant voltage coming in too high or too low. So it shifts the entire thing. It's a direct current offset. It moves it in one direction and leaves it there where it's not supposed to be. So yeah, it's entirely possible that maybe it's every outlet in his house, but this one particular outlet anyway is getting a consistent under or over voltage. Here, a voltage regulator might actually help you out, because this doesn't seem like it's a current problem.
Yeah, and you don't really know what's going on here. It could be the smart thing is going, oh, it doesn't need as much power as it thinks it does. I mean, it really could be something as weird as that. Who knows? You got to get the first step of this is to call your power company and say, I think it's installed incorrectly. I'm having problems with my electronics, and don't say anything about the fact that it's a headphone amp, because that's just going to open up a whole can of worms.
Yeah. It might have revealed a potentially more serious problem, so it's worth making that call.
Yeah, for sure. Would there be any concern? He's got 4 questions. This is number 3. Would there be any concern plugging 2 DACs and 2 headphone amps all into one power conditioner? It reveals more about Steve W. No, unless your headphones are the size of subwoofers and you need lots of power. You could be fine. I think the 35 watts they're going to be drawing maximum at full volume with test tones is not going to be an issue here. What power conditioner UPS would we recommend? Keep in mind that it needs to be quiet. APC, we already talked about that. We're moving on.
Yeah, this is a little bit of shame. I mean, here I would recommend the little bit more expensive J35B. That is $350 most places, and that one does have the voltage regulation. Now, the problem is when it goes into voltage regulation mode or when it goes into battery operation mode, it does make some noise. Now, I have to say, the J25, the J35, out of all the battery backups I've owned, they are some of the quietest. They don't make a lot of noise. My J15 certainly makes more noise. It buzzes quite audibly. And then I have some of those, computer ones that are just a battery, and they actually, beep as a warning to say, hey, I'm on battery over here. So definitely you wouldn't want those. The J25, J35, they're quieter, but they're by no means silent. You can definitely tell that they are doing something. It's a low-level buzz, so I don't know if that will be quiet enough.
Yeah, you could, if it's just a voltage regulation issue, you can just get a power conditioner. Should do the trick. Like the power in my house is I'm often seeing the light where it basically is saying your voltage is a little low, and it's boosting. It's telling you that you're boosting. And those things, I mean, I'm not as close as I would be if I was using headphones with them, but I've never heard those things make a sound. And back in Australia, well, not such true. In Australia, I did hear them make a sound, but oh no, that wasn't that. It was the voltage converter thingy, whatever it was, power converter thingy, because I was going from 220 to 120. Anyways, they are pretty silent, dude. So you might try someplace where you can get like an APC, the H10 or H15, which you would need the smallest one they do to do this for your headphone amp, and see if that makes a difference. But you should still call the power company first. That's definitely the thing you should do first. You might not even need the battery backup, is what I'm suggesting here. It might just be the power conditioning in this case. Which is funny, because a lot of times we talk about power conditioning being complete BS. In this case, it's a real thing. So there you go. John. Well, I mean, but people think that audiophiles often talk about how it makes the biggest difference in the whole world. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. John M. Over on Facebook, if we are calibrating display in a light-controlled room, what should be the target value for the gamma? He's heard everything from 2.2 to 2.6 and everywhere in between, so what is the correct setting? I'll let Rob Rob, because we were talking about it before when I was more awake, and I wasn't very awake then. But I did do some reading on gamma, and I have done video calibrations before. Generally, when I was in my THX class, the suggestion was if they give you multiple options for gamma, try them all in the room as you're doing your calibration, and whichever one gets you closest is the one that you go with. So it's sort of a set-by-set sort of thing. The rule of thumb is 2.2 is what everything should be calibrated. If it's a 2.2, that's where you start, and then you could test the other ones, but assume that 2.2 is probably the one you're going to go with. I know that with light control, they can get a little bit different, but the idea here is that the gamma curve controls the brightness based on the color or something like that. The color based on the brightness. I can't remember.
Relative rise from black to white. So if you had one way to visualize this, if you had a gamma of 1, all that would be happening is, you get a 1 IRE signal in, and the light level would rise a certain amount. If you had a 2 IRE signal coming in, it would rise by the exact same amount. It would be a linear line. It would be a diagonal line going straight up. So as your IRE signal level goes up, then the amount of light coming out going from black all the way up to white would rise linearly. So as you go to a higher and higher numerical gamma, you can kind of think of like pulling the string on a bow with your right hand. If the signal is starting on the lower left corner and going to the upper right corner, you take your right hand and pull downward. That would be the way it would shape the curve as the numerical value of gamma goes up. So a 2.4 gamma means that you are staying in the low black levels. It is a slower rise from black to dark gray than a 2.2 gamma. A 2.2 gamma is rising slightly faster from absolute black to a very dark gray. So yeah, 2.2 is the industry standard. The reason you'll sometimes see 2.4 is in a pitch black room with a very high contrast front projector. Sometimes a 2.4 gamma will look better. So, a slower rise from absolute black to very dark gray. If you have it at the standard of 2.2, the shadows will look a little bit too light if you're super picky about it. And then the opposite can be true. In a very, very light room where you have a lot of ambient light, you might end up with a 2.0 or a 1.8 gamma, because in order to see the shadows, you need them to become brighter more quickly out of absolute black. So yeah, 2.2 is the standard if you want to stick to it, but there are reasons why you might go slightly above or below it, and hopefully that sort of answers that one.
Like I said, whatever you calibrate a display, you should calibrate as it's going to be used. So, you change the lighting to whatever that is. If it's in the middle of the day, well, then you calibrate in the middle of the day. If it's completely pitch black light controlled, and that's how it's going to be used, you calibrate it there. So it kind of depends on the setting. That's why you can't just post up on AVS what your calibration settings were for a display, and everybody goes, okay, I put it in, now it's perfect, and work that way. Okay, it doesn't work that way, and it's not just because the sets aren't all absolutely the same. There's differences, from set to set. It's also room to room, and how gray things are, and whether or not you have a black ceiling because you're weird. Jim L, this might be our last question for the night, because it is. That's because I said so. I'm the boss of you. Jim has 2 Speakercraft AIM. Which makes me think of Iron Man 3. AIM Cinema 5, and 1 AIM LCR 5, and 6 AIM 7 5. What?
Yeah, the AIM 7 5. Like 5 is the model number, AIM 7 is the series.
Whatever. Anyways, he's got a bunch of Speakercraft speakers, okay, and he sent us the specs and all that, which I did not at all look at. These are all in-wall speakers, but for his new setup, he would prefer to use freestanding speakers. So he has the tools and skills to build cabinets himself, but wants to know if it's even a reasonable idea to build freestanding cabinets for these in-wall speakers, or if he just should buy all new speakers and sell these Speakercraft units. If he does build the cabinets, what sort of design and sizes should he make them? Okay. I feel like I should answer the question before I say what I want to say. So let's just go with that. Yes, you can. You should. I would assume that these things were designed with an idea of a back box in mind. You should build that back box and then wrap it in something not ugly. Uh, that's pretty much what you should do, and I can't think of any reason to do anything else. I mean, you could theoretically say they very well be Speakercraft might say it wants this much area open space, open space. That's the recommended open space behind it, and in which case you can build it in whatever shape you want. You can use other speaker manufacturers, bend sides, non-parallel surfaces and stuff. But I don't think it's really going to make any difference, but it might make some. You could do that. Of course, the thing is it's no longer mounted on the wall where it was, or in a wall where it was actually intended to be mounted. So, it's not going to sound. I don't think it's going to sound the same, no matter what kind of back box you do. As long as once you take it off that wall, it's going to sound different.
Yeah, Speakercraft definitely does have backer boxes for their in-wall speakers. I mean, the thing is, you'd want to make sure that the internal volume of whatever freestanding cabinet you construct has the same internal volume as the backer box that they would recommend for that model. So it'd be a matter of contacting Speakercraft or looking it up online to find the backer boxes that they would sell. In terms of what you might build if you did this, you would want to make sure it has that same internal volume, and you would want to build a sealed cabinet. I mean,
yeah, it has to be sealed. Unless they have a front port on, in which case then you know what you've got to do at that point.
But I do not start trying to mess with ports or transmission lines or something like that, because, I mean, you have to tune those things, and these speakers were not meant to be ported. They're meant to be in a wall with a sealed volume of air behind them. So build a sealed cabinet, and that's good news, because that's simpler.
Yep.
All you would have to do is, there'll be speaker wire binding posts on the back of the in-wall speakers. You can just run regular speaker wire from those to some speaker binding posts that you could have sticking out of the cabinets that you build. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So this could be a fairly easy build, really, all things considered. Again, how will they actually sound? They won't sound the same as if they were in a wall, because the wall is this gigantic baffle that's extending in all directions out from the speaker, and it's recessed into the wall and flush with that gigantic baffle. So the sound will change, but they will certainly function. So there's no functional reason why you can't do this. I can't tell you whether you'll love them or not.
No, yeah, I mean, if you love these speakers and that's why you want to do it, well, then you should probably do it. And I would do it. I would do it with 2 of them first and see what you think before you commit to what 5, 6, 9. No, he's got 6, 7, 8, 9 speakers. With all the numbers on this stupid thing, I can't figure out what's what. Looks like 15 of them. But anyways, no, he's got 9 speakers. Anyway, so that being said, I am not a huge fan of Speakercraft, and it's not because I've heard them, because I have kind of heard them at trade shows before. But let's just put it this way: if you're walking through a supermarket and somebody screamed at you every time you walked into the supermarket, somebody was screaming, "We sell the cheapest fruit. Don't buy those apples. Buy these apples. These are the cheapest apples." At some point, you go, "What the hell's wrong with your apples? That your apples are so damn cheap?" Because that's what you would think, right? If somebody screamed it every time I've been to a trade show, Speakercraft's got these huge signs. And I've taken pictures of them and posted them on Audioholics before. Huge signs talk about how much money you can make profit by selling Speakercraft speakers. Okay, that's all they talk about, is how much profit you can make. Now, to a custom installer, that's a very important piece of marketing information. From my perspective, that makes me think there's something wrong with those speakers. Now, I'm not saying there's something wrong with your speakers, and I'm not saying they sound bad. What I'm saying is that unless you got them on sale, chances are that you paid the premium for them, which is fine. And if you love them, then give it a try. But that has turned me off of Speakercraft speakers. So what do I think you should do? I think you should buy some new speakers. You should sell them, try to get as much money as you can for them, and buy some other ones. Now, if you try it and you do 2 of them and you love it, well, then, dude, more power to you. Now you have a fun craft to do at home, and you've got speakers nobody else is going to have, and it's going to be a pretty cool thing. And if you ever have me over, I'm going to go, it sounds pretty good. I almost guarantee you that's what I'm going to say, no matter what I actually think. So, second part of his question is he has an 80-inch 3D HD TV and plans on a 9.2 speaker system. Yes. We are getting through to people. I like the point 2. He'd like some recommendations for AV receivers that can handle such a setup. Yes, he does watch 3D. Well, 3D is not an issue. No. Anything that's got HDMI 1.4 and even 1.3, I think, can pass it. So any receiver that came out in the last year or two can pretty much, especially any 9.2 receiver, can handle it.
Yeah, the question here is whether you want to have 9 amps built into the AV
Yes.
receiver, or if you're okay with getting one that has 7 amps built into it, but can drive 9 speakers simultaneously, and therefore you just add a separate 2-channel amp.
Because I think my 4000 can only do 7, right?
Right, yeah, 7 internal, but it can handle 9 speakers.
Yeah,
So
can it, I wasn't sure if it could handle 9 speakers. Yeah,
you'd
cool.
have to add an external 2-channel amplifier to your X4000, and then it will drive 9 speakers.
Okay, well there you go. That's the one I recommend because it's awesome. It's still in the box. I don't know. I say it's awesome because I bought it. You must buy the things I buy.
I can certainly recommend that. Over at Accessories for Less right now, the X4000 from Denon is going for $650.
Dang, dude, that's so cheap.
That is insane for that receiver. I am sure they are going to be sold out very, very quickly, so hopefully you will hear this in time. But yeah, that would be a great choice. You do have to add a 2-channel amp to it. So of course, there are some that have 9 amps all built into them.
Yeah.
They are definitely more expensive once you do that because they're basically going to be the flagship amps.
Yeah.
Or the flagship receivers that do that. Pioneer, their newest ones, was the SC85, 87, and 89. They do Atmos and all that fun stuff, but they have 9 amps built into all of them, even the least expensive one, although that one is still, I think, around $1,200, something like that. So, I mean, just price-wise,
you can buy it. You can buy an EVT with 2-channel amp and a X4000 for less. Now, you could just spend some time with Accessories for Less and do a little bit of your research on your own on this one. It's really easy for us to recommend the X4000 because it is a hugely popular receiver. That means that a lot of people have bought it. I know that Cliff over at AV Audioholics has had it for a while, and he loves the heck out of it. So I haven't really, even though I haven't had it myself. I mean, I haven't tried it. I have it. It's in the box. But I have no problems recommending that. There's some Yamahas out there that I've looked at that have that have the same potential. Certainly the Marantzas will be a little bit more expensive. The Onkyo, I spent my fire here or there. Pioneers, there's options there too. But right now, Denon's sort of the way to go with receivers with this last year's line. What's going to happen in the future, I don't know, but with this last year's line, they really did really well. Now, as we're seeing as we're coming up with this next year, we'll see exactly how this kind of shakes out. Now, I do want to address something before we go. I should have never. You kind of know when somebody's baiting you, and I got baited on Twitter, and I responded, and I shouldn't have, but I did. And basically, I got called out from a couple of people saying, but one particular guy on Twitter saying that I shouldn't be telling people not to buy receivers. And at first it started off because it was about Atmos, and I'm like, no, I don't really. I mean, don't buy a receiver because of Atmos. I think that people aren't going to use Atmos, regardless of whether or not the receiver has it. No, but you told people not to buy it. Okay, this is what I'm saying about this next line of receivers. You are buying an obsolete piece of equipment. I believe that you're buying something that's going to be obsolete in a year or two, max. Mm-hmm. The reason is because they are telling you that they can do Dolby Atmos, that got HDMI 2.0, and some of them are saying HDCP 2.2. Okay, what they're not telling you is that if you're anybody other than Onkyo or Integra, they're saying HDMI 2.0, right? Mm-hmm. Where that's full bandwidth, 18.2 gigabits per second or whatever it is, right? That's the full bandwidth, which means that it can do dual streams of full HD. It can do a bunch of other stuff. The extra deep color, the extra wide color, the 12-bit color, and all that stuff. It can do the 4K, full 4K, everything else. Okay. Yes, it can pass all that, but what it can't do is it doesn't have HDCP 2.2 support. It doesn't. None of them do. They're saying, hey, we have HDMI 2.0, so don't worry about it. You're going to worry about it when you get some 4K native content, and it no longer will pass through your receiver because it doesn't have HDMI, HDCP 2.2. You say, okay, well, then I'll get an Onkyo. They have HDCP 2.2. Yes, they do. They do on one input. For no real apparent reason, it's input number 3. But that's the one they chose. But it's HDCP 2.2, but the HDMI 2.0 is limited to HDMI 1.4 bandwidth. That's 10.2, not 18, 10.2 gigabits per second or whatever it is.
Which means, yes, it can pass 4K resolution, but only at 24 frames a second.
And it can't do the extra bit depth of color. You know, you basically, okay, so now you've got HDCP 2.2 on one input.
Yeah.
Okay? And so, you're future-proofing yourself there, but then you're not going to be able to get the full benefits of 4K that you're supposedly future-proofing yourself for. Okay? Wait a year. Wait 1 year. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying this next one, it's half-baked right now. I'm not saying that if you need a receiver and then you buy one, I am not saying you made a bad purchase. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the stuff that they're telling you that you're buying these receivers for, it's not ready yet. They have not fully implemented it, and you're going to end up with a receiver that's not. You're going to have to. This is what I'm going to be getting for the next 5 years of this podcast if I continue to do it for 5 more years. Is why doesn't my TV work with? I plugged it into my receiver, and now there's no sound, or now the picture isn't passing, or it's giving me an error. It's because you have a half-baked HDMI 2.0 port. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, we've essentially answered Jason S.'s question, so we may as well just mention it so that I don't put it on the list for next
Where
week.
is it? At the bottom? It's at the bottom.
Yeah, right at the very bottom. But yeah, I mean, he was just sort of wondering why. You know, I've said this is a spectacularly bad year to buy a brand new receiver. You know, and we've recommended frequently, like, if you're looking at one of the higher end Denons, get the Denon X4000, not the X4100. Now, I don't have any problem with the X4100. You know, if you want Atmos, then, you know, and you're willing to realize that in a year or two, if you want HDCP 2.2, you're going to have to get another receiver, because there's no way to upgrade this thing. There's no firmware upgrade. It is a hardware problem. But I mean, the reason we've been saying X4000 over X4100 is because X4000 has a great feature set. It has everything you would want other than Atmos, and it's at such a lower price right now. So that's why it's, you know, such a higher value. If you really want that Atmos, then yeah, X4100, go for it. But yeah, this is one of those things. I mean, over at AVS Forum, Silicon Image, they've just said, they're one of the chip makers, they've just said they have just finally made a one-chip HDMI solution that can do full bandwidth HDMI 2.0 and HDCP 2.2. And you're saying, oh, great, that means it'll be here soon. No, things are on like an 18-month development cycle. It might be 18 months before we see AV receivers that can do HDMI 2.0 full 18 gigabits per second bandwidth with HDCP 2.2 copy protection. Now, hopefully it'll be sooner than that. Marantz, with their highest end pre-pro, their AV8802, they've sort of said it to some people sort of behind the scenes in that, like, yeah, we're probably still going to launch it in about January of 2015. But we're hoping that we'll be able to, you have to bring it into a service center, hoping we'll be able to replace the HDMI board to give it 2.2 support, give it the HDCP copy protection 2.2 support. So, I mean, that's a $5,000 pre-pro. So they're basically saying we're hoping to have an option.
What it comes down for me is, okay, so you decided that you want to upgrade your receiver, and you're giving me all these reasons why. The only reason that's valid right now is Atmos. If that's all you wanted to upgrade your receiver for, then you're okay. If you have no plans of going 4K, then you are fine. Okay, I'm completely behind you on that. But don't come to me and say, I want to buy a new receiver because I want a future-proof and I want 4K and I'm gonna buy a new display in a couple of years and I want to get ready right now for it. I got to make this purchase now. It's just not going to work out in your favor. Now, if you want Atmos, get Atmos, and I'm 100% for you guys enjoying your Atmos. I think it's great. I think that we should have as many audio options as possible. But it's just that's all you're getting. That's all you're getting for twice the money. Or if not, I guess at this point it's almost more than twice the money. That's all you're getting.
Yeah, what I'm worried about and what I know is going to happen is that some people will be buying a brand new AV receiver this year, and in a year or two when 4K Blu-ray is out and it has copy protection, because we know it's going to have some kind of copy protection.
Yeah, they made it for it. Of course it's going to have copy protection.
So they're going to plug that in, and it isn't going to work. They're going to get a black screen. They're going to get something that says you don't have the correct copy protection, and then they're going to say, I bought a really good receiver back in 2014 or the early part of 2015 that said it had HDMI 2.0. What is going on? And we'll be like, there is nothing you can do. There is nothing. Unless your manufacturer offers you a hardware upgrade program to replace the HDMI board, there's
We're
nothing
just trying to head potential questions off.
That's what we're trying to against. So.
All right, let's finish this up. All right, that was Jason's question, right? That pretty much was Jason's question. All right, so we don't have to answer that one next week. All right, for all of you that didn't get your questions answered, we will get to them. I promise. You want to ask us some more? Rob at avrant.com, Tom at avrant.com. Website is, of course, avrant.com. Go to facebook.com/avrantpodcast. Twitter is at First Reflect for Rob or at avrant_Tom for me. For avrant.
Thanks again to Josh Pollard for joining us, because that was a fun guest appearance. Contact him again at Josh Pollard for his Twitter. And Richard Gunther didn't manage to join us this week. That was too bad. We were hoping to have him on too, but he is at What Annoys Me or at What Impresses Me. So you can reach those guys there.
Okay. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
And for all you guys waiting for the hangout, it'll be a few minutes.